Hi, everybody. Tina Brock, producing artistic director here at the Idiopathic Radiculopathy Consortium in Philadelphia. I'm your host for Into the Absurd, a virtually existential dinner conversation. I do hope you'll join us the next 50 minutes. Sit back and relax as we explore the lives, the hearts, the minds, and the spirits of creators in Philadelphia region and around the world. And good afternoon, everybody. Hello, I'm Tina Brock, the producing artistic director here at the Idiopathic Radiculopathy Consortium Theater Company in Philadelphia. I'm so excited to say theater company because it is now seeming as though things are happening out on those stages. And I'm so very excited to talk on our show today with the artistic director of EgoPo Classic Theater, Lane Savadove, about his season upcoming in 21-22 and the shows that he has planned. And very happy Fringe to you all as we share together, return to the stage and talk about and get excited about being in the audience and thinking about the places that magic happens. So we invite you to put your questions in the chat today for Lane. And in the next 50 minutes, we're going to be treated to a wonderful conversation, I'm certain. Lane has joined us before, and I'm always so fascinated with the way in which he puts the season together, what his priorities are, and how his creativity has been affected, and his thinking about the pandemic. So those are the topics on today's show. But enough about the actual thing we're going to do. Let's just do it now. Lane Savadove, welcome to Into the Absurd.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Tina.
Hello. And we should tell everybody, it's obvious, but I think worth noting that you're doing that wonderful wearing so many hats today, being a dad, being an artistic director in a car.
I am. So my 6-year-old is at a birthday party that I wanted to be able to take her to, and I was the only parent on duty this weekend. So she's right over there smashing a piñata, and I'm here.
And you're gonna tell us all about the upcoming season. I think this idea of the many hats that you wear as a father, as an artistic director, it's quite something. And I'm so very excited about the season that you have coming up. And for everybody that hasn't received yours in the mail, I'm sitting in front of on my background here, but this is the brochure for Lane's season. It's called Awakenings and Transformations. And I guess, Lane, that's where I'd like to start. And that is, you wrote this beautiful introduction in your brochure about we've been in isolation and sort of what it means to be awakened and to come back out and to re-enter the world. And I wonder, as you were thinking over this long time, when did you know how you wanted to re-enter as an organization?
I mean, I had the idea of awakenings, going back to when we expected vaccines to start happening and what we thought this fall would be. And it was because by calling last season Isolations, I painted myself in a corner to figure out what came after that, right? We framed last season as an idea that we were in a process of isolating ourselves, and something was happening. And then what comes after that? Well, it's coming back out of doors. And in many ways, I quickly thought of that as mythological. And I quickly went back to my roots in tarot cards. I go way, way back with tarot cards. And in many ways, sometimes like spiritual mythology may be the thing that's truest in my heart, maybe at times, and I hide it a lot. I don't really talk about it in my artwork very often. And
I
so
have never heard you talk about, I mean, not that we, but it's not, I'm so fascinated with that part.
I know there's a kind of intellectualism that works against it. And so I tend to bury it, but it really is something that's been part of me for a very long time, and a certain kind of spirituality that's linked to the body and mythology is a big part of how I move through the world. I just keep it to myself a lot.
Oh, that's so fascinating. So, for instance, pulling a piece out of last season in Isolation, when you worked on the Beckett piece, Rockabye, you've worked on so much Beckett over the years. I remember seeing your production of Endgame. Was working on Beckett this time how was it influenced by being in the pandemic? Aside from, obviously being a perfect choice.
Well, just getting even back to it this later in my career, because maybe my first huge spark of passion, I was probably 19, 20, 21. And then as a company, we were really deep into doing Beckett work when I was in my early 20s. And certainly I've revisited with Company, but Company is a piece I actually made, the first time when I was about 23. So addressing rockabye at my age felt vulnerable again. It actually felt like going back to some of my sort of passionate adolescent roots. But I wanted to address it in a real present way. I didn't want it to be retro to me emotionally. And I was addressing it in terms of the death of parents. I lost both my parents over the course of last season. And so it was a real honest way and I was working on it with my wife directly while Damien was working on it with two other actresses, but my work on it was just with my wife. So it was very personal. It was very much about our fathers and their passing, or in Melanie's case, her father having an illness that he's been fighting for many years, and wanting to just address in our minds because when we decided to do it, my dad hadn't passed yet. So for both of us, we were thinking, what will it be like? What is that process like for us? How do you help somebody say goodbye? How do you help somebody navigate? How do you transition from life into nothingness in a way that feels generous and present and real? And so it was very, in that way, spiritual, in a way that it wasn't when I was younger.
And to me, that is such a huge part of his work, and specifically rockabye. I think it is hard to be in that piece, not that I haven't performed that piece, but to read that piece or to sort of be inside the understanding of it and not have it bring you to the places that you're talking about in terms of and isn't that the beauty of the work, that he provides that space for you to do that? How was it for the audience in working as observers on the other side of, can you give us a little background on how the audience experienced the play? And
it was quite surprising, particularly to Melanie, to my wife. And she's the one who has over and over again this very intimate experience. But the audience meets on a corner. That's all that they know is going to happen, and then they walk through a back alleyway for the one that occurred at our house, and then through a back gate they take a chair in front of a window that has its Venetian blinds down, and then suddenly the Venetian blinds goes up, and as far away as my cell phone is to me, there's the woman in rockabye, and you're just in this incredibly personal relationship one-on-one for 10, 12 minutes. And that occurring during the pandemic for many people was really profound and intense. And there was, I would say 50% of the people walking out of that backyard had tears on their face for all different kinds of reasons. I mean, it was just a bit of an overwhelming experience. And that really, Mel saw that, and Mel would sit there and perform and see people crying or people scared and then opening. And so just over and over again, it was this like spiritual process of connecting with a human being across this pane of glass at a time where there's been very little connections. And it was something. And I would say that probably set up, without me thinking about it until you asked about it, that probably set up the spiritual foundation for this season. Like that piece ended up being more spiritual and more profound than we expected.
Did you feel that inside of yourself, did you and your wife, as you were discussing, doing rockabye, did you know there was something that you were looking to resolve or to work through in selecting that piece? You did. Yeah.
No, I knew it was about this idea of crossing. Well, when I chose the piece, it was early in the pandemic, and it was about, oh my God, here's a way that two people could meet. That's it. And because it's a piece about a woman looking out the window for connection, I went, oh my God, what a perfect pandemic piece. This is it. It's a piece that can happen in a storefront window and eventually became a house window. But it wasn't much more than that. Not that that's small, but it wasn't until 6 months later, as my dad's illness progressed, and that I knew that he wouldn't make it through the season, and he knew he wouldn't make it through the season. And Rockabye, by the way, is his favorite piece, and he took me to see it when I was some ridiculously young age in that New York premiere. Whenever that, I forget the years now, but I was young. I was like
the Billy Whitelaw.
Yeah, Billy Whitelaw. I had to research it, but after she did it at SUNY Buffalo, which is where it premiered, because I was like, I know I saw Billy Whitelaw, and I'm pretty sure it was at La Mama where I would later work. And he took me there when I was like 9 or something. And sure enough, that after the SUNY Buffalo, they did a long week in New York at La Mama that was barely advertised. It was almost a pop-up, but it became the New York Times wrote about it. And yeah, my dad took me to see that because he's crazy. And when he hears some cool wackadoodle theater piece, the way he would think about it, he took me, and he was a single dad. And so I was going with him.
Oh, that's a great story.
I knew, and it was just sort of perfect. And he was so excited that I was doing it, and he knew he probably wouldn't get to see it. And was so excited that Melanie was doing it. And so it just felt like it was a very gentle goodbye love note.
Yeah. I wonder if you were to, so just keeping on the Beckett, I want to get to season 2022 here, but I know, from your years of having worked on the work, are there other aspects of his work that you are contemplating doing again, say Waiting for Godot? I guess the real question is that sort of unlocking of that spiritual piece, be it linked to your family, to your father, and to all of what you just described. Is there another part of you that, say, if you were to do Godot now, would you do it? It wasn't that long ago that you did it here in Philadelphia, right? Maybe what?
Yeah.
10?
Yeah, something like that. 8 years ago, something like that.
I just wonder if that sort of spirit piece in there, if you were to do it again, or say Endgame again, or Company, or any of those, if you think it would look dramatically different now.
Oh, it would deepen Company in weird ways. Like, I just love going back to Company again. I love the pieces like Company and Not I and Rockabye, these really sort of like isolationists, like the deeper introspective pieces that don't need to layer on a comic sort of structure onto it. They mean a lot to me. I have to be ready to approach them, but they feel super genuine, feel super connected and human. And so and Company is about a man lying back in his back in the dark, slowly dying. And so wanting to figure out that mental aspect of what does it feel like, because he's trying to pinpoint in Company, it's sort of a pure version of Rockabye. He's trying to pinpoint the moment that we go from life to death, and how do you feel your way through that bridge. And so I'm always excited to take on Company again. I think I've done it, God, I don't know, I'm up 6-7 times now. I would always revisit that and keep deepening the music and the sense of touch. And I would love to take that on now, more than Godot and Endgame, probably. Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's just a cycle. Some plays cycle back into you again. I'm sure I'll do Endgame again. But yeah, that's where.
Did you feel like working on Rockabye as a director, or working on it in conjunction, with Mel? Is there something qualitatively different about that rehearsal process for you on those specific pieces than in other works? Do you find that you feel differently during that time? I ask this because when we did Ohio Impromptu, and we just happened to be rehearsing it on a Sunday morning always, and I just remember always feeling there's always something very sort of religious about Beckett, the stillness of it, the depth of it that's necessary, the focus, the cueing in, the just full of sort of emotion. I wonder if that was an experience you had working on Rockabye. Did you notice that you felt different working on it this time?
I mean, God, yeah. I mean, and it's maddening, and it's absolutely maddening because I feel like it's a piece that you have to sit at the table with your actors and those kind of pieces, and just be absolutely present. There can be no BS. your brain has to work. There's an intellectual, what's really challenging about Beckett, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but is your intellect has to be incredibly sharp, because you're dissecting these structures that are embedded inside of his writing, and you have to understand how the pieces are working technically, and it's extremely intellectually complex. So you have to have that part of it, while on the other side of your brain, you have to have complete, utter genuineness, presentness. In the end, that's what he's about. He's trying to demask and communicate something that is utterly more exposed and honest and direct than anything anybody's ever written. And so you have to breathe out. You got to figure out how to be present. And you go through these cycles, because you have to go down the intellectual pathways, and then you recognize, oh my God, I'm just purely intellectual with this, and I got to let him go. And then you try to be present, and then you've lost something structurally that is necessary, like craft wise, to do the piece, and you got to go back to that. But yeah, I mean, Mel and I would sit across each other. I would give her my eye focus the entire rehearsal, so she was speaking it directly to me. Often with these monologue pieces, I let the actors play them directly to me, because they got to get used to having this face to connect with and talk to.
Yeah. So moving into this scene, what's that?
My little girl is banging on the window.
Oh, well, she can come on. Tell her to join us.
Well, no, she just, yes, Emmeline. You can see her right there. There she is with a
hi.
I'm on the call right now. Okay. Hi. Thanks. You got a lot of candy. Thanks. Okay. Thanks for saying hi. Okay. I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye. I love the fact that it
Thank you, everybody,
takes me
for
back.
being tolerant.
Oh no, it totally takes me back to when I would take my son Liam, with me to rehearsal when he was just very young, and rehearsal would just be interrupted a lot with questions and Legos and things. And this is what happens, right? So yes. It's great. Yes. Let's move into this season, because I'm super excited about Dane and Jenna working together. Tell us what we need to know about this season coming up.
I mean, overall, its goal was to be a continuation. So in the isolation seasons, we went through this very specific progression that we sort of would discuss almost weekly and regulate because the pandemic was changing as we went through the season. So, and we sort of tried to match it. And so, we started online and, communicated in the piece Underground through social media. That was the closest. I'm sorry, I skipped. We started through the mail on right. Emily. And so the closest we could get was a mail piece that would be mailed to you early in the pandemic. And then we went to Underground, where the character communicated to you through social media. And then Rockabye, where you communicated with the audience through a window. And then Nocturne, where you were in your car and you were communicating through the windshield. But at the very end of the play, you actually get out of the car and socially distance outside, watch the final scene. And so we had gone through this progression of finally exiting the car. We were inside this glass vehicle and then leaving it. Well, what's next after that? Well, now we're in an outdoor tent. And we were very specific about that progression. And fortunately, we were right that one could use an outdoor tent right now to perform. It's just a better place to be. And so we knew I had wanted to do a piece with Dane working with Jenna for a long time. We've been discussing it, a piece that would be generated by them artistically. And Dane felt really connected to the idea of doing Alice in Wonderland right now, as this idea of coming out of one reality into another reality. Because in a sense, that's what happened. We went in the pandemic and there's been a mammoth shift in our country, not a singular shift either, mammoth shifts between January 6th, insurrection, a raising of consciousness of the immediate need for racial equity in this country, and letting the bar for that become much higher, much quicker, and many other kind of changes just that are a result of the pandemic, and we were interested in that vertigo. of what happens when we basically come back out of our houses to a new world. And Alice in Wonderland felt very right for that. He has a much darker read on the novel about Alice really being not so happy about being in Wonderland, and Wonderland being a really painful place. And for him personally, Alice too is about, and I super connect to this, what's it like to be at a parents' party that's hedonistic and they're drinking and having a wild time, and you're a child, and the lack of sense of safety that comes with that, the vertigo for the child that comes from this place of almost danger. It was actually the source, that was the theme of actually our Seagull, was that same exact sense of the child and their sense of like, lack of safety.
So without giving too much away, will guests be a part of the party? Guests are a part of the party, and the story unfolds within.
They are. And absolutely. And it created this idea actually that we would do our gala, which is normally a spring standalone event, but our gala is actually the opening night of the party. So the true sense of being a party guest is you come to opening night, there's this catering by De Bruno, and there's champagne tours, and all this is on the Glenford estate on the Delaware River. So this incredibly old Philadelphia wealthy estate. It's gorgeous. I had never been out there. Hold on, my little girl wants me again.
No, it's fine. She can come on.
Okay. No, she just wanted me to keep her candy in the car. Now it is.
Oh, the piñata candy.
Yes. No eating the candy. Don't worry. Okay.
I'll make sure he doesn't.
Promise. All right.
Or go. No, don't eat the candy.
And so, it has this sort of decadent feel, and we are the parents having this decadent party celebrating coming out of COVID. And Alice goes through this journey while we're partying, basically, and we get to see it.
It feels like it has somewhat of a Roaring '20s feel to it too. Just the celebration that follows.
It's actually set in the 1960s, so it's a similar, like, that decadent, that decadent party atmosphere.
Yeah. How was for you pandemic creatively? Did you find it to be, because it wasn't self-imposed isolation, it was, did you find that your days creatively were different in that it wasn't something you chose to put yourself on? I'm fascinated with how people creatively managed and manifest, how their creativity manifested during this time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much a theater artist as opposed to a painter. And so for me, a director's creativity you need the structure of saying you're going to work on a show. Like, I have to name it. I don't just sit and work on theater abstractly without a destination. Other people do.
Concepts.
I don't. We name it, we debate it, we have a destination. I may do a lot of play reading, don't get me wrong. And certainly a lot of the late spring, early summer going into this year was a lot of play reading, a lot of educating myself in areas that I wanted to. But because we were different, because we really wanted to keep producing. And that's the biggest question really of why I felt like I wanted to keep producing. And part of it was that, I had been through Katrina. I had the ability to produce had been taken away from me for a really long time. And I decided that I would fight back. I had a decision about, do I stop doing theater when something pulls the rug out of you that intensely? And I made a decision to work back so that I could have the structure of creating theater. And again, unlike painting, it's not just a decision, I want to do it today. You have to build, as you know, Tina, a giant infrastructure around yourself. And, and the company is mammoth. It's like changing the direction of an aircraft carrier. But I decided I wanted to do that. So I wasn't going to let the damn pandemic do it again, in part. Now, I was okay going like, I'll flex as much as we need to flex. But it was Katrina and Dane, the staff of EgoPo, were really on my mind. I also wanted to figure out a way for us to just keep going on our journey together, whatever that journey would look like. And I wasn't going to be quick about going, oh, well, it's virtual. Because I don't really know what I really don't know what virtual theater is exactly. Because theater is by nature not virtual. It's the opposite. And so it was important for me to really figure out, I've made theater in so many difficult situations in so many unusual places that I was like, there's theater that can exist. We just gotta debate it and figure it out a lot. So I kept working. And so it didn't feel that different intrinsically. We put up a 4-show season and I was artistically directly involved heavily in 2 of them. And so, yeah, it didn't feel much different.
I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, that's a great lesson in, firstly, the fact that you've had so many experiences and produced so much theater in so many different kinds of places under so many circumstances, many of them very, very difficult, certainly positions you to be rigorous about what you're doing. You've been there. Not that this is, I'm guessing, a little bit different in the sense of it's a pandemic and the whole world, as you say, is radically altered now.
Yeah.
So how does one move through? But I'm so, it makes me feel so good to hear we could see, yes, you're producing a season and you're moving forward, but personally that as you were doing that, it didn't feel that much different to you in the sense that you just needed to produce and you did. And I think that's a great lesson. It's like theater is this, and we have to make this under these circumstances.
Yeah.
In looking at let's look at your season 2021. Are there pieces of the ways that you moved through 2021, the different ways in which we move through as an audience those shows that you will continue, that you learned lessons from, that you would continue to keep in mind as possibilities?
Yeah, I mean, there's several things. One is that we were really excited, it turns out, about this idea that we would stop worrying about what the venues did in terms of ticket sales and capacity. And I don't mean that we don't care about capacity, because we make theater to communicate, and the more people we communicate to, the better. But that we would stay true to whatever the piece needed. Rockabye was going to be one audience member at a time. That's what it needed. And we would figure out a producing structure that could allow that to happen. And so, Alice and this tent and Glenn Ford also they came together at the same time. Like, it needs Glenn Ford. And Glenn Ford needs this piece. They came together. We knew we had a chance to use Glenn Ford. And so we also thought in that direction. How do we want to use Glenn Ford? How do we want to be in an outdoor tent? But also, as I developed and deepened my relationship with Damien, that's been going on for several years, it was also like, okay, how does that keep deepening now, right? Damien was super much an artistic instigator last season, and we wanted to keep going in that direction. So that led to Wine in the Wilderness. I was more conscious. I've been conscious for many years about making sure that the act of doing classics didn't feel elitist, and it didn't feel like we had to obey the expectations that come with the idea of a classic. And often that means an all-white cast if you're doing Death of a Salesman or something like that. And we've always wanted to pull the rug out of that. We've always wanted to reawaken classics, doing Buried Child with an all African-American cast, doing the very Jewish Death of a Salesman that we did. But what awakened even more for us was let's also do this at the level of source material, so that we have really 2 responsibilities. One is to make sure that the current oeuvre of classics, the current canon, as we might call it, is done in a way that is done through the bodies of Americans, the bodies of Philadelphians. And so how does a classic change when we voice it and we body it with the community that we live in? That's one step. But the other step is redefine what the canon is. And that we recognize our responsibility as a classic company. Like, the world's not just going to redefine the canon for us. Like, as practitioners of classic theater, maybe we're the most responsible for redefining what the canon is. And so that's been a doubling down on our part. It's not like we haven't been doing it for a long time, but to really double down on it has been exciting. And to, do a deeper dive into Childress or into Lorraine Hansberry, and recognize that when I do commit to doing a deep dive, because doing a deep dive into a single playwright, it can be a 2-month commitment. You're like digging up material that might not be published and reading everything you can, and it takes a little while. And to give, like, for instance, we're not doing Hansberry this season, but we will do Hansberry. Deep diving into her and recognizing that it's a vast oeuvre that she has, and that it not fitting in the classic canon is Crazy Town, feels exciting. It feels exciting to go, oh, here's an opportunity. Like, here's some real amazing classics to undig. Like, Wine in the Wilderness is a fantastic play. It's just purely a fantastic play. And it has a story structure, a set of characters that we just don't see. So you lean forward so much with it because you're like, I don't get to see this story told. This isn't talked about on stage. And yet it's clearly a classic play in all of the definitions of just how perfect the playwriting is, the structure of it, the depth of it, how fully developed it feels as a voice. It's great. And so going down that rabbit hole with Damien has been fantastic. And then Brenna is amazing at her dramaturgical level and her ability to sort of find plays that feel like they answer the need of the moment. She's incredibly instrumental in this process. And so it felt like out of left field when Life is a Dream came, and it always actually been on our list, but it goes much further back than we often go. But doing the Spanish Age felt really ripe, and working with Felipe, who is in Colombia and was a Temple MFA grad who I knew quite well. And we've been debating for years the idea of working with Felipe. And so it's a great mix to do that play. And all of it came out of a deep dive on what is awakening for us, the sense of what's real, what's solid. How much is this pandemic and us, the weirdness of us wearing masks in classes and having everything in our life be Zooms, and this birthday party happening over here with kids with masks on their face? How much is this reality? How much will it feel like reality, 10 years from now? How do we process 9/11 20 years later? How much does it feel part of reality or just a dream? And so Life is a Dream is all about that. And then finally, it was just really important to me. This is very personal to me, the idea of going back and doing the Shubert piece that got shut down. And I can't say that people didn't talk me out of it. There were people who were like, you move on, the time has passed. And I was like, no, when Katrina hit, we were, we had this amazing production of Spring Awakening sort of in stock that was ready to tour. And we had the Maids that was touring, and everything sort of got stripped from that. And it took us a year, but the first thing I wanted to do was I said, no, it's Spring Awakening. We're going back to our signature piece. I want the stability and the structure to say we can do this. I wanted to survive Katrina by remounting Spring Awakening. That was survival to me. And so for me, surviving this pandemic theatrically means putting up Curse of the Starving Class. It's a giant, difficult play. We were this close to opening it, and I wanted to open. And so that is an awakening for me. And that really fit in a deep way. So it wasn't stubbornness. It's just a deep way, I feel like, to really go through this secular awakening, it was necessary.
How long will you rehearse Curse before it goes up? And will
Yeah, we'll back up like 1 week into the process from where we left off. So we'll probably go into a 2-week rehearsal process. We have the piece filmed. I want to stay with the blocking. It'll change as we all want it to change, but the blocking is the starting place. We're going to start literally from the day we walked off that stage, which was a fully, staged run of the show.
Now you're moving over to Drexel. You're moving over into that space? Did anything significant have to happen in the rebuilding of the set? Or
the spaces match up really well. It actually gives us a little bit more space that I actually really value. It's hard to explain, but the set almost breathes in a way spatially, and so I actually have more space to work with. And I love that Drexel space that Nick Anselmo worked with his faculty at Drexel to put together. And it hasn't been seen with professional shows very often, but it's an awesome space. And so I'm really excited to actually be out there and also let people recognize this very cool state of the art black box that's out there.
I think we talked about this the last time, but the question is popping up for me now. Did you ever have any desire to be on stage as an actor?
Yeah, I consciously gave up that desire. Yeah, I was an actor director for about 4 years of my professional career. So maybe until about 25, 26, I would still perform. And it gave me too much stress. I knew it
Mhm.
wasn't a sort of natural fit for me. Um, I'm not saying that it's not stressful for all actors to walk out on the stage every night, but it was obsessive. It wasn't joyful,
Mhm.
and so I honestly just sort of naturally let it go. And my mind always went to directing. It was much more about, for me, being inside of these scripts and these structures and all of the kind of I'm just going to call it paperwork, for lack of all the paperwork that comes from directing. And I mean that creatively, and
Mhm.
it changes what that is, but making these, spreadsheets of scenes and what's going on tactilely and spatially and sensorially. And I just, it was the more natural world for me to live in. God knows I act in my body constantly when I'm in the state of directing, and it's exhausting. You end a directorial day, and I tell this to actors who haven't directed all the time. I'm like, imagine having all the impulses you have in a given 4-hour rehearsal and not moving.
Yeah, right. Well, you're moving a lot in the car today, right? You're I mean,
There you
you're
go.
very,
I
very animated,
I do.
which is what came into, but that totally makes sense with the way in which you approach the work and how the body
Yeah.
and, um, I guess, do you think that obsessiveness, if you will, that kind of drove you crazy as an actor or whatever, is just very well served in the in the directorial?
I think that's probably
Part?
true. I think it probably has an avenue to go to, and in some ways, it's, in creating these structures that I teach when I'm teaching directing, they're almost like containers for you to obsess into. Yeah, that serves me.
What is
Oh,
your?
I think
Oh, we're
birthday cake
back.
is coming over here. We can all see the birthday cake.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'll get some soon. Okay.
But everybody wants one, so you better come soon because the whole cake's gonna be gone soon.
Okay, we'll do.
Really soon, because there's a lot of guests, and these cakes are really small.
Okay. Thanks, Em.
So please get one
We'll do.
in 1 minute.
Okay. All right. It's okay if I don't have any. It is.
Okay. Don't try to get cake, okay?
Okay.
Try your best to get that.
she's a roving reporter.
She is.
She's the pinata, the roving pinata reporter. Like, I love that, the way that she's just looking after you and making sure you get your glucose,
Yes.
That's so great. I think we talked about this the last time, but and it's probably a very obvious question, but being a dad and now all the many hats that you wear, it feels like it has deeply influenced you and your work in ways. Did you ever imagine the ways in which it would?
No, and I'm not sure I have the wisdom yet to really know how it influences. I'm just I feel like I always thought when I'd be getting a pair, I'd be like, oh, this is what I've learned from, and I'm like, I don't
know
I'm just
anything.
making it. I just make it happen every day. I just get to the next day.
It's a Beckett play, Elaine. It really is. You just put one foot in front of the next, and it's like, I think this is what we do now.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have I've always had a lot of childishness in my work, and so I don't think I'd like to say like more childishness has come into it, but it's always been there.
Yeah.
I just think I'm a little bit more gentle with my actors, honestly. I just think I'm a better caretaker than I was. And so I think about that. I try to bring those caretaking instincts into the rehearsal process.
Well, you spoke earlier about when you're, rehearsing Beckett and you're sitting and your intellectual mind takes over and it goes down a path, but you realize that you still need to be just so acutely present. How do you in rehearsal often you have very large casts and you have multiple things and your brain is churning and there is just a lot happening. There's a lot of energy being shared in that room. What have you worked on over the years or kind of how do you manage? It's a very large question and too large for
No,
an hour-long show, but
I've thought about it because you need to stay present, and my answer is that the more that you prep, the more that I actually bring into that rehearsal as a director and that I already know. And so my prep has gotten more intense over the years. It's almost getting to the point where for every 4-hour rehearsal, I need 4 hours of prep that day. And so, and that's, and I'm not saying there's months of prep before you even start rehearsal, but an additional like full half day of prep for a half day of rehearsal so that I don't need to panic about how far we get or whether we make anything. It takes that idea of panic away. It lets a director stay more present with the performers in the room, and be patient, because you have a kind of, you've mapped out a potential blueprint, and you can always just turn back to your blueprint whenever you need. And so it allows you to actually listen better to the actors. I'm getting one more question over here.
no, that's great.
There's no drinks and I'm really thirsty.
Could you try to ask? Oh, actually, I have a solution for you. You get an orange soda, and I think that's probably why you came over.
Can you hold this? No, I didn't.
Are you done with it?
Yeah, kind of.
Oh, okay.
It has a lot of cake.
Okay. I'll see you soon.
You got a cake.
Keep it. All right.
I love this interview, conversation, birthday party, roving reporter. This is what the virtual medium was intended to do, right, Lane? We're on location.
That's right. That's true.
At the birthday party, we're getting real-time reports.
Right.
I mean, this is the real world, and you can't, it's dramatic, and it has its. There's a bunch of questions in here, so let me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me ask if. Let me get this out there. Question: when EgoPo moved from New Orleans to Philly, did that change the spiritual underpinnings that you use in your approach to theater?
I mean, it literally changed our mission, actually. So. We began doing theme seasons after New Orleans. I became more interested in the longevity of the conversation of theater. We were like a lot of companies, you spend a year, you make a show, you put the show up. Great, that phase is done, and you do a new one. And I was interested in this idea of, when Tina and I both started in Philadelphia, there was this heavy push towards subscription theater. It was very odd. And so I just listened to that a little bit. I was like, okay, but what's the subscription mean to me? And it became this idea of a narrative arc to a season of theater. And I got really interested in that idea. And we've been pursuing it ever since for the last 12 years, or longer than that now, 16 years in Philly. So that was the real big change. I mean, in a deeper level now, that when COVID hit, I recognized that, I wasn't going to get buffered in the wind too easily. I was going to really try to hold course. And so, yeah.
Are there realizations that you made during that time you were away regarding maybe the way you run the company or certain aspects? And you've addressed this earlier in the conversation, but some things you just know you don't want to do anymore. Whether it's like you said, we're not going to worry about how many people show, we're going to make it happen so that if we have 5 people in the house, 5 people are in the house. Is there something about the way the company maybe ran, or the way, is there anything in that way, the complication of things, or is energy going in a direction that maybe isn't as productive? Was there any sort of pearls that were gleaned during that time? It sounds like you're pretty much were focused moving ahead, and you actually expanded what you had.
Yeah. No, there was, for a long time, there was this real serious doubling down on the idea of ensemble, but we had been that way in New Orleans too. We were very much an ensemble. And I think over the next 5-6 years following it was the idea that allow ensemble to be fluid. I was trying to force it. And ensemble, as you know, Tina's, I don't know if there's a more complex issue just in sort of day-to-day working in theater than that. what is the idea of an ensemble? Who is being served by the idea of an ensemble? What do individual ensembles need? What's the theater need? How are they different? And in the end, I was like, let me just let go.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just let ensemble form as ensemble forms without me trying to like control it and make it. And so that's sort of the phase I'm in right now.
I feel like I had a lot of thoughts along that were obviously so much smaller than EgoPo is, but with similar, I think, thinking into like how does a smaller theater make these things work? Your structure is a lot more sort of fundamental than, I mean, you know, you have certainly been around much longer, which is, I think, I was at a wedding the other day and actually talking to someone in the artistic community. And I said, wow, it just really feels like starting over, except we have, 16 years of having made, had some successes and learned things, and we can put that to use. But it does feel like going out, as you alluded to in the beginning of the show, just into this, the world has changed. And we don't really know what audiences are going to, what is that capacity going to be like? Yeah. But as you say, to sort of take your mind off of that, this is something I've been working on. Just take your mind off of that. Approach it as if you were starting again, only you have the luxury of having a lot of years behind you. And it will be new and it will be different. Yeah. Is there any expectation is there anything you're hoping to come out of this year? Like what will, I hate to use the word success, but like, how do you imagine feeling really good at the end of this year might be a result of?
Good question. I'm now going to ask my little girl, can you give us like, there's an audience watching. And so I need to you can't see them here. So I'm not just talking to Tina. And so I need to be able to keep talking. Can you give me 15 more minutes?
I just need to tell how long until you're done your meeting.
15 minutes. And I promise I'll come get you right away. First thing.
Because if Aaron is there hanging out with their
I'll
kids.
be right there with you in 15. I promise, okay?
Okay.
All right. I love you.
Thank you. Back
there.
now.
Boy, you guys are getting a really indoor window in parenting tonight.
Well, no, I think it's very dramatic. In this sort of sense of life is so interesting. I just find it really, really interesting, these moments.
And it's real. And we got to recognize the fact that, like, having families and making theater, we can't separate them out again. I mean, theater makers have been abusive parents for 100 years, maybe forever. But like, theater people have these crazy late rehearsal schedules, and kids have just been like, I can't be a parent to you like a regular parent. And my wife and I have been really, really dedicated to going, no, I want it to be. And I always thought this when I was young, I want having a theater artist as a parent to be a cool thing. And I don't just mean cool like, ooh, I mean cool like they get to have an experience that other kids don't. And so I brought her to rehearsal the last 2 days, and I want her to see that. I want to see people gathering in a space just for a creative act, for no other reason. They gather for creativity, and that's it. And she has seen that her whole life, and she's seen audiences gather and what's it mean for them to mingle before a show starts and see the actors put on their costumes, and this sense that like, oh, I see, theater's just an integral part of life. It's just an intrinsic, it's one of the things that happens in life, like there's police officers. I don't know how she'll respond to that yet, but I'm super glad that she sees that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, Liam's a lot older now, but I do think a lot about, boy, I wish I could go back and do years 2 through 10, maybe I would be home more. I wouldn't be rehearsing as much. I wouldn't do that many shows. I wouldn't work full time and try to run a theater, all of those things. But then we'll be talking about it and he'll say, there's just myriad ways, Mom, in which being exposed to those writers, to that, to those experiences was enormous in his decision to do certain things. So I think it's just in the fabric and so important. So, it's that you make it just part of the experience. I forget what question we were on, but I love.
You too. I was like, what was that
Emily's,
last question again?
I love the sort of roving reporter aspect of all this, and how the birthday party is the most dramatic thing that's happening for anyone below the age of 10, and many people above the age of 10. So there's a lot of interesting things to report, and I'm glad that we're, I want to see, I want to make sure that I get on and just remind everybody to head over to EgoPo's website and get your, all the details on their upcoming season. Oh, I know what it was, Lane. Is there, I don't know, this is like a lame question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It's like, because it sounds like you're very much paying attention to just what is coming your way instead of trying to plan it, and just really, absorb the gift and that is happening, which is what allowed you to create this season and make use of the people and the things in your world that were saying yes to you.
Yeah.
Is there something you'll feel at the end of, do you imagine at the end of this season, will having just come through it be a mark of like, we did it? Are you trying to sort of grow audience? I guess we're always trying to do that. Or are there different audiences? Is that
I'm gonna hold this question. I got it. Yes.
Oh.
Yes. You can take your shoes off totally.
Okay. Can I keep them in the car?
Just put them right next to the car.
But somebody.
Okay, I'll stay here and you can give them to me.
Okay. One shoe.
There's a shoe.
And a miss.
Great. All right. I'm back again.
Good.
So, as far as how is this season gonna carry forth?
Yeah, I mean, just is it like, I don't know, will it, do you imagine that things are going to be fundamentally different in sort of rebuilding audience, or is that just a story waiting to be told?
It's definitely a story waiting to be told, and no, I'm not but I'm very big picture when it comes to this, of like, oh my God, theater's been around, 5,000 years. Like, what happens in these 3 years is not intrinsically changing anything. I really don't think so. I think there's a lot of audiences excited about, Hadestown being back on Broadway, and they're flocking up to see it. And if that's happening this early, like, Lordy, when we open back up, I actually think when we do finally, whatever the official mark of like, we don't need to worry anymore, we can go do whatever we want, I think theater's going to have a heyday for a while. I think people really are going to want live interactive experience. I am sure about that. I think movie theaters are honestly going to have a huge heyday. I just think it's going to be so exciting to get back out of the house and just go places and adventure and have new experiences and be busy out in the world. And no, I'm excited for theater in that way. I think we'll probably open up in terms of what venues are. I think people are going to be less patient for boring stuff. I think the idea that, like, I don't know, I go to one theater only and see their 5 random shows every year might go away. I think there's more excitement about that. I think that was already happening, but I think more and more people are wanting to see whatever is cool out there, whatever piece strikes their fancy, and they want to have that experience. I think people are going to want experiences. I think I think theater's about experiences. And the more that we just treat theater as, there's 16 rows of audience and they sit back and the theater event happens inside of the proscenium arch and we're just observers of it, is like, we can do that on Netflix. Like, make it an experience. I don't know what that means for any theater artist, but like, it's got to be an experience. Like, experiences are 3-dimensional and sensorial, and they embed into memory, and they're some level interactive. And so I think there'll be a greater impatience and want for that.
I would say so. Yeah. Because let's face it, we've gotten used to, and in many cases discovered pretty wonderful things on film and in television, and the comfort of being home and not working. So I'm not going to say not working so hard, but not working maybe in the same way that we did before. And so I do think that specificity of like, and that excitement, they used to say back in the day when Ionesco, there was this anticipatory Ionesco excitement, because you always knew something unexpected was going to happen. Yeah. And that is what, people were always very, why they pursued that work with him. So
Yeah.
I agree with you, and I think they will be much more careful about, for many reasons. Careful is maybe too strong a word, but just selective, I think, in the work that they do. And don't we all just want want that?
And I want to sort of match that. I want to make sure that we're careful and selective in the work that we do, that we don't put up 4 pieces just because we need to put up 4 pieces. And we didn't know that we would put up 4 pieces. These are the 4 pieces we felt like we wanted and needed to put up to address this idea of awakenings, to get that arc. But if 2 enormous pieces create this arc, or whatever does the conversation for the season is going to be what it is. I'm going to feel less of a need to be like, and there must be 3.5 shows.
I've definitely felt that in the thinking about this, is like the space will happen and be there when that happens. And there's a number of things on the platter which are under consideration, which feel right for this time. But if it's not 3 shows, then it's not 3 shows. It's what we can and want to do that is going to contribute to the conversation right now, in this community and for our audience. So, well, Lane, thank you so much and thanks to your lovely daughter for giving us on-the-spot reporting at the birthday party today, and for sharing thoughts deep and far and wide on the upcoming season, your upcoming season. And I can't wait to see where it all goes.
Thanks for being patient with me. And thank you always so much for just how present you are, how the depth that you get out of an interview, and just how comfortable and genuine it feels is really extraordinary. I mean that.
Well, thank you. I learned something new about you today, and that's a whole nother show that we'll have at some point about tarot cards and spirituality and this side of you that I always obviously comes through in the interviews, but it's just, you learn so much about people. And that's one of the reasons I'm so glad we did this show over this time, and have had the opportunity to get to know people just a little better. So bon voyage. I'll send you all to your cake and to your party. And I can't wait to see you this season.
Thanks, Tina.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Take care.
Bye-bye.
And thanks to everybody for joining us during this first of 4 Fringe shows, in which we will be coming to you at the same time, Saturdays at 5 p.m. It's a little bit of a different link every week because we're going through the Fringe. So if it looked a little bit different this week, that's what's going to be happening. And next week, we're going to be talking with Mark Wilson. Mark is the executive director of the Zollner Arts Center at Lehigh University. And we're going to be talking to him about his position, which happened during the pandemic, and what plans Mark has. Very interesting and full career on many different in many different areas of the arts, and I'm very excited to talk to him about the plans that he has for the Zollner Arts Center and how his journey brought him to this place. So I hope that you'll join us. That's Mark Wilson next week here on Into the Absurd. Have a lovely week ahead. I hope you get out to see some Fringe shows, and we look very forward to seeing you here at the table next Saturday at 5 p.m. Be well.